Hi, welcome to the ninth episode. My name is Drew,
And I'm Beth.
and we're gonna just jump into it. This is our ninth episode, so let's get after it, Beth. What do you say? All right.
Sounds good to me. There is a
Yeah.
lot of activity this
Okay.
week on nest cams and at our physical nests around us in Wisconsin. So lots to
Yeah,
cover.
it's definitely a busy time of year. We're gonna start with Fort St. Vrain in Colorado. We mentioned this on our a couple of our pods in the past, and they actually had three. Or they actually had four eggs, and they actually hatched this week. And I'll leave it to Beth to what transpired.
Well, the last eaglet um, yesterday was it was almost a full day old. And unfortunately, the youngest one, the 1 day old, expired. And what the people who run the programs, the nest cams think, and Drew and I both concur, is that the eaglet died of heat and exhaustion. So if you look at this photo that we have up, this is all four eaglets earlier in the day, and mom is beautifully casting a shadow across them. And this is what really needed to be the situation yesterday. Mom needed to act as an umbrella to protect those young birds. The oldest two are about a week old, and she was doing a great job. And then eventually, what happened is that little she exposed the birds to the sunlight, and when you're a week old, you can't really thermoregulate, but when you're a day old, you really can't. And that little bird hadn't had a full meal yet, so it's still living off the fluids it was getting when it was in the egg, but it hadn't had a real meal yet, as it shouldn't at that stage. And that sun and warmth on you is just going to dry you out. And I think that that's really primarily what happened to it. That and the fact that it is in a deep little hole there, of which a 1 day old is going to have a hard time crawling its way out of to get to the shade of mom. The other three crawled to mom later in the day to get into her shadow, um, but the little guy just couldn't do it. I think it was hatched actually extremely well. It was a
Yeah.
very healthy, strong chick. I think the sun just depleted it.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I was in Colorado for a while. Well, actually, this is the first time I started monitoring nests was in Colorado, and one thing that just I experienced from being there, from moving from the East Coast, is you go skiing or you go like pretty much like every month, there is a chance you're going to get sunburned. And, me being fair skinned, you're just, with the altitude, you're so much closer to the sun. So it makes sense that, unfortunately, this guy, just got baked in the heat. And it kind of raises the point that it's really hard. To raise four eaglets. It's pretty hard to raise three eaglets to fledge. And we'll go through it in an upcoming episode. But one of our nests that had the four fledge, it's super rare, and unfortunately this one didn't make it. But here's the picture of the three. Looks like the three are doing well.
They looked great this morning.
Yeah. So, and it's kind of displays. I know we've had some issues at some of the other nests where it was storms or cold weather, but the extremes, the hot weather can affect them as well, and the sun. Just the nature of the nest too, and just to go into a little more depth on what eagles like for their nest. Obviously, they like it really tall. They like tall trees, and most of them are like dead on top. And what that does is it allows the adults a real good sight line. But the problem with that, with the eaglets, is there's no shade. As we see with this one, it's just out there, and that can cause some issues. And it caused issues in this case. It's
Well,
just
as you know too, Drew, you and I, when we get to the end of the season, we're like
yeah,
fledge,
yeah.
because Wisconsin in late June, early July, the biting flies are out. That sun is so intense. Those
Yeah.
eaglets are dark brownish black.
Yeah.
That sun is just cooking those birds in the nest. And that's where we see eaglets in some distress. Their wings are dropped down to their side to help them to cool, which looks like they have two broken wings if you haven't seen it before. And so they just look really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great motivator to fledge, is because they in general want to fledge someplace to where it's cooler and they can get into the shade.
Yeah, and I think we've mentioned this before, but it's good to review it as well as they're getting all their, there's not like a water bowl in the nest. So
Oh yeah.
what they're doing is they're getting their liquid that they need from the food that's being brought in, the fish or other items, other prey items. So this one, for example, you know, um, part of the reason is he hadn't eaten. They don't eat right after they hatch. It takes them a little while to get to that point, and he just wasn't getting the liquids that probably the other ones were getting as well on top of the shade. So that's another problem. But it's just what happens.
It was just unfortunate that the day its first full day starting out
Yeah.
as an eaglet was such a hot sunny day.
Yeah, yeah, and that's that we've talked about this many times, Beth, is those first couple weeks are really hit or miss. I'd say the vast majority of the nests that we see fail is right after hatch, just because they're so susceptible. As you said, they can't regulate body temperature. They need to be brooded by the adults if it is cold, and it's just once they get past that, a week or two, they have a much better shot. But those first weeks are crucial, and that's where we come in with the nest watches. We don't want um, any activity like human activity or any disturbances during that time it can be very devastating, and weather, any types of weather, as we with this instance, a hot day or a cold day or a storm or rain or whatever, they can be devastating, and unfortunately cause the nest to fail.
So, Drew, there are a lot of people out there that sort of have this myth that the youngest chick is doomed anyway, because its siblings are going to kill it. And, I think that's actually a very rare, not very rare, but it's rare. In our estimation of what we're doing here in Wisconsin, we're on the ground. We don't have eagle cams, which are proof, but we don't really we have a lot of three eaglet nests. We don't see a lot of harsh attacking like what happened at Kitsatchie. I think Kitsatchie really illustrated what happens when you don't have food coming into the nest,
Yeah.
and that's when aggression starts. But the idea that just because this fourth one, was going to be so much smaller than the other three, and it was going to be killed by its siblings, that's just not true. And they seemed like a little cohesive bunch there just for those few hours that we got to see them. But the assumption shouldn't be that the youngest born is going to immediately be knocked off by one of its siblings.
Yeah, I think it's it's one of those things that is kind of been learned through the years, that the runt of the family or whatever is not going to survive, and it's as you said, it's not true in a lot of cases. To be honest, we don't see a whole lot of sibling rivalry. In our nest program, as long as there's prey items and enough food coming in there, everybody's going to get fed. It's as you mentioned, when it gets tight, that's when you see it. When you see, for whatever reason, the adults can't find enough food, and it could be, are they a younger pair and they're just not as their ability to hunt and to fish is not as good as some of the older pairs, or it's for whatever reason the territory is not providing. And that kind of goes into why they pick the territories. You know, Beth, you've seen a lot of
Right.
nests. I've seen many, many nests, and um, most of them, I'm like, this is a great spot for an eagle nest. And then, it's by water. It's by, out, for instance, out in Colorado. I think you can kind of see it in the nest. They're definitely pulling some prairie dogs and rabbits. That's pretty common in Colorado. That's one of their main sources. It ends up being mammals, but they need those prairie dog fields there. They need abundance of rabbits and other mammals, or they need to be by, a lake, a river, or whatever. They need to have a good source of food. And if they don't, I've come to some of the nests and like, you know, you kind of know you're like, I don't know if this nest is going to go so well because it's just, it's out in the middle of the field, but there's not a great place to fish. There's not a great source of food. So, and I think that's crucial. Well, as well with the territories is picking a spot that is going to be able to provide those foods, and then you won't have those problems. You'll be able to, raise three, two and multiples, two and three. Um, to fledge. And as I think I mentioned this probably at least a couple of times, our averages are about 1.5 fledging. So that's the norm. So if one eaglet fledges, that's a great thing. Two is actually great too, because it's going to push up that average number of fledges and how much the population is growing. So it's not easy, and it would have been great to see them all fledge, but it's kind of nature, and that happens.
The other thing I think was interesting about this, and I asked Drew this morning when we got online and we were chatting about this podcast if he saw what happened to the fourth eaglet, and he said no, and he said, "Did she eat it?" And and I started laughing. We both started laughing because it's like that's totally what we expect.
Yeah.
You don't waste a resource, and if food isn't abundant, you certainly don't waste that resource. But the mother buried it into under the grasses there. So the fourth eaglet is buried in the nest, uh, which was really interesting to me
Yeah.
because I've certainly never seen that because again we don't have nest cams here. We watch from the ground, but I thought that was interesting that she recognized it as her chick. It appeared because she chose to bury it underneath the grass rather than consume it.
Yeah, and you can see just from this picture, you can see there's a couple prey items,
Yeah,
one here, and then I think this looks like a rabbit of some sort. But there definitely wasn't a shortage of food, which is a good
yeah,
sign. It's a really good sign that these three can make it to fledge. So this is definitely not a case of shortness of food, which usually causes the sibling rivalries. It's a survival of the fittest. That happens, and there's a lot of other stories. Maybe you can get into it in another pod, but other species of eagles, they're a little bit rougher as far as what they do, and a lot of them, it's they just it's just one fledge, and for some of them, some of the jungle eagles I can think of, it's every 3 years they fledge one
right.
one eagle.
Yeah,
Um,
harpy eagles
yeah,
it's several years to raise an
yeah.
eaglet. Um,
So, we're a little spoiled in what bald eagles do. I think that's part of the reason that they were able to rebound as well, so well. And some of these other eagles around are still struggling, still endangered because of their nature of their breeding as well. So, we get a little bit spoiled with the bald eagle as far as their ability to adapt and also raise multiples out of the nest. So,
well, and I have a nest where they raised two their first year that I was watching them, and then the next 4 years it was three
yeah.
for those 4 years. And then last year they had two. And I remember I was disappointed. I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, what the heck? They're only raising two this
Yeah.
year? So I have expectations of three, and a lot of us do.
Yeah.
And as the territory becomes more crowded, as more eagles move in, because there is a lot of space still here in southeastern, anyway, Wisconsin,
Southern, yeah.
um, that, you know, food is plentiful. And I remember you, Drew, telling me the fact that you keep getting three eaglets at so many of your nests is a sign of abundant food.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a great sign. Because nature and just their nature of an instinct of the eagles, they will kind of lay eggs appropriate to how much the prey is doing and
yeah.
um, how I guess how healthy the food chain is around the nest. So that is always a great sign. That means that's a well-picked territory, and then there's plenty of food around.
So to sort of recap a little bit here, Drew, the Colorado nest succumbed not to sibling rivalry or to any, it wasn't stepped on, nothing like that. It's weather related. And then when we go back to Jackie and Shadow, that third eaglet was likely also weather related.
Yeah,
In that case, too cold in a snowstorm. I don't know how well it was covered by mom while being brooded, but that would certainly have been the number one reason. So we come back to weather. We have seen one sibling side this season at the Kitsatchie nest, and that is a lack of parents being able to bring food into the nest for
yeah,
whatever reason, whether it's their food isn't abundant or the parents are just not that adept at hunting and realizing that they have a growing bird on their hands and it needs more food than they were able to provide. But it that's the rarer end of things.
yeah,
What happened
yeah,
at
for sure.
Kitsatchie?
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to some of the other nests. We got some big news from the Northeast Florida nest. What happened at that one, Beth?
Well, this is Bodie in the foreground, and we have Juvie out there on the branch. Bodie went out to see Juvie out there where he is presently standing. So Bodie had branched and been branching, and also doing a lot of wing exercises, building up his endurance, his lung capacity, and his muscles. And he decided to go out there to visit Juvie, and Juvie saw Bodie coming and went to go move, and both eagles kind of dropped like a bomb. So they got tangled up and dropped below the visibility of the camera. The monitors who and admins for these sites that give us these videos did a great job immediately identifying where the bird was and letting everyone know that it was safe and sound, that they were below the nest. But then the issue is Bodie has to be able to fly up
Yeah,
and get back to the nest. And as you know, flying down is really easy.
yeah, it is.
Flying up is considerably harder. And Bodie made it back to the nest that evening that he had uh, unintentionally really fledged. And now he's got a little bit of a
Yeah,
issue with his eye there, but that looks like no big deal. It'll heal in a couple of days or so. Admin were thinking that he probably got hit with a few pine needles in his inadvertent fledge. Uh, but this is a great sign. He came back to the nest. He flew off it, I know, again yesterday afternoon and flew back to it. So he is on target, and Juvie seems to be right there waiting for him to join him. So,
yeah. So this is a huge success. This is ultimately what the Eagles want to do, and just to let those know that are not that familiar with the process, the nesting season, these guys should be still getting fed in the nest. Most of the adults, what they do is they continue to drop food off at the nest after the eaglets have fledged. So I would, if you really like this nest, I would keep watching it because they're likely going to still be around the nest for a while. It's usually about, depends on the bird, but most of them stick around for, 4 to 6 weeks. And then they'll go off on their own. I think we mentioned this in some of the other podcasts, but likely Bodie and Juvie will stick together. We seem to see that, and they'll go off and start wandering. And we've seen a lot of data. Unfortunately, they don't tag birds as much, but I guess fortunately because the population is doing so well. But when we were tagging birds, they were seeing, birds that had fledged in Massachusetts, and these are juvenile first, second year birds, and they're seeing them out in Michigan or down south or whatever. So they tend to wander around. So these guys probably eventually will start wandering and trying to find a good source of food, at least for a little while. And best of luck for them. But I would keep watching, and we'll kind of keep an eye on this cam as far as what's going on if they're still visiting the nest.
Well, we should mention too that what happened to Bodie with his unintentional fledge
Yeah.
is kind of common.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a lot of times they're getting lift, they're jumping up and down on a branch, getting lift, and a wind gust comes up, and suddenly they aren't coming down on the branch anymore. So there's a lot of unintentional fledges. Um, and I saw where one of the monitors had called it a fledge, which
Yeah.
it's like a fudged fledge. So it's a fludge, and that is what Bodie kind of did. And I read a minute ago that at the Kitsatchie nest that eaglet had fledged
Yeah. Too.
also.
Yeah.
So that's not surprising. The idea that an eaglet intentionally fledges and does it perfect is kind of rare. So it's that awkwardness of coordinating all that stuff, together, and the confidence to jump off the rim or the branch that it's
Yeah.
branching on to take that first flight. You know, that's a nerve-wracking ordeal for a young bird.
Yeah, it's as you said, it's very common. You have that perception of like off on a branch. I don't know if I can't remember if we've addressed branching, but branching, the term that Beth used and that we use it's exactly what actually Juvie's doing right now in this picture. They climb out on a nearby branch and they're practicing and they're getting ready for that first flight. And when we see that at the nest watch, that's a really good sign that they're going to be fledging soon. And this one's accidental and it does happen quite a bit. But that's kind of how it goes. You don't usually see that graceful
Hmm.
fledge, I guess, where they're out on the branch and their first flight is just, amazing. They
A
just
thing of
fly,
beauty.
and
Yeah.
that doesn't, I think that's a misnomer. It doesn't happen like that very often. I see a lot of um, crashing, and something that we do with the nest watch is, once they're fledged, is maybe keep an eye on the territory just to make sure they're okay, because a lot of times they crash down below, kind of like they did in this instance, and we just want to make sure that they're okay. I have Unfortunately, there's been some cases where they crash and they hurt their wing or break their leg or whatever, so it can be dangerous as far as fledging, and that is expected with the height of these nests. I mean, most of them are 80, 90 feet up in the air. So if you don't get it right, you can get injured. So,
And this is where we come in handy because if they do have a bad fledge, then we can notify
yeah,
whomever, or if we can get to the bird, we can take it into rehab so that it can recover um,
yeah,
from a bad first a bad fledging. So the second time they take flight after if they've fledged and they get back to the nest, that next time they leave the nest is under their own power, which is a little bit nerve-wracking, but it goes much better. The third time they think they're pros,
yeah,
and they look like it. They're
yeah. And
they
just to
got that
address,
effort.
I know a lot of people, um, they're concerned, and I get it. When you spend an entire season watching these guys grow either on the nest cam or out at your nesting site if you volunteer for a watch like we do. You get really attached. But the thing you need to understand is this, these are wild birds, and most of the what we use is kind of when to rescue and when to not is if it's in the nest and there's nothing that, it's just nature, we don't get involved. It's part of nature. But once these guys fledge and they're out the nest and there's something happened to them, there are some instances where we call in a rehab or somebody, DNR or whatever to catch these birds if there is something wrong, if they get injured due to fledge. So that's when you start getting more involved. When they're up in the nest and little eaglets and sibling rivalry or whatever's happening in the nest, the vast majority of the time we just don't get involved. It's part of nature, and that's what we don't want to, kind of hands-off approach on those instances.
Well, you described the situation really well earlier when you were talking about the tops of these trees are kind
Yeah.
of dead. There's no umbrella for these birds. But because of that, it makes it nearly impossible for these trees to be climbed.
Yeah.
An arborist going up a dead tree is not something an arborist does.
Yeah.
The last thing they want to do is climb a dead tree. And then when you have this tree, you could almost get around and sort of into, but the branch closest to us is not enough to support a person in a harness and throwing gear up there. Plus, the other thing that's going to do is it's going to cause Bodie to fly right off the nest. And
Yeah.
if he hadn't fledged yet, it could cause an unintentional fledge for a bird whose wings are not fully developed. They're not fully unfurled yet. So it can't take real actual flight. And that's going to cause injury. And also, it's going to cause damage to the nest. So there are just a myriad of reasons of why you do not ever go into a bald eagle nest. It's got to be, it's a rare thing, and you really want a cherry picker to be able to get there, and that's a big expense.
Yeah.
So what happens in the nest, sort of stays at the nest, and it's a hard, cruel reality. But you cannot rescue every bird, and even like the little fourth eaglet yesterday, a day old, taking that into care, that is a 3-month commitment to raise a bald. There's no way it's not going to end up imprinted,
Yeah.
and then it's a life where that bird can probably not be released into the wild because it's imprinted on the humans who cared for it. So you have to worry about the quality of life of that bird, that what its future is going to be if you interfere.
Yeah, and that's a question I'd love to get to, and we'll do that with future pods. For example, we had a rescue a few years ago that Beth was involved in. I was kind of coordinating, and we'll kind of go through that. I think that'll be a good pod, maybe a like kind of offshoot pod that we can talk about how we came to conclusions and how it all happened. Because there's a lot, and
It
just
still makes me laugh, though.
yeah, yeah, but it's one of those things that I don't think people understand. Well, why aren't they intervening in this situation or that? There's a lot that goes into it, and I think that'll be a great episode to kind of educate people on how much there is a lot of things that goes into a rescue, especially in a nest. And it was awesome that we were able to pull it off, but there was a lot of hurdles, and we'll get into that in another
Showing up
episode.
to the wrong nest really
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
start it off on the right foot.
yeah, that's one thing we gotta think about. And as I said, once they're fledged, and intervening is a lot easier. But again, and Beth has had experience with this with fledglings as well. They're not they're even if they're hurt, they are hard to catch. And
If
that's
they are
another thing.
feisty, yeah.
Yep. And they bite, they scratch, and you don't want anything of those talons. Those are sharp.
Um,
So,
yeah.
and the beak too. So, but we'll get in on that. I think that'll be another episode we'll do. But look forward to that in the future.
Great pictures on that one too.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And what do we have going on here? This is one of
This
our
is
other,
Trempealeau.
yeah,
So
Trempealeau,
this is
yeah, or
our
Wisconsin nest.
Wisconsin nest. Yay!
Yay, yeah.
So right under Mom's beak there, that is the hatchling.
Yeah,
Um,
kind of see it
and
right
you know
there.
what? I forget if that was yesterday or the day before. But
Yeah,
anyway, it's a recent um, hatchling this morning. Mom was incubating, brooding on the nest, so I wasn't able to see the chick this morning or see if there's a pip on another egg. But right now, all looks great, and certainly that is a place with a lot of food
yeah,
abundance. This is right along the Mississippi River, so um, this should be fun to watch the three of these kids grow up too. So this is our youngest nest that we're watching on an nest cam
yeah.
right now.
Yeah, and this is this is typical for, northern Wisconsin. They're getting starting to get their hatches right about now where we coordinate. It's more in the south and we have a lot of eaglets. I think we do have some incubating, but most of them are on eaglets by now. But as far as the northern Wisconsin, they're usually a week or two behind a lot of the southern Wisconsin nests. It's just how it is. If things freeze up and the weather's a little colder um, up there, so it's a little delayed as far as the southern nest goes. So yeah, great thing, and we'll see hopefully all three hatch. But again, as we've seen from some of the other nests, it's not a done deal. And even if we see pipping, I see a pip, it's not necessarily might not hatch, but fingers crossed everything goes well and they have triples. They have the three in that nest, so that should be fun to watch. And what do we have here? This is one we've highlighted before too.
Yeah, this is Bella and Scout.
Yeah,
So this is where Scout uh, last year unfortunately made the mistake of not recognizing his chicks and thought they were a prey item. But this year, boy, doing a great job. This is the three eaglets. They're about 3 to 4 weeks old. They all have a different hatch date, but they're roughly around that age range. And I guess this really shows the picture of you talking earlier about how they like the tops of dead trees.
yeah.
But there is no shade at this nest. There is
Yeah,
no
you can see it.
shade at
Yeah,
this.
they'll probably get a little bit shade from like this
Yeah.
tree once it leaves out, but especially this time of year when the leaves aren't out, there is no shade
But yeah,
whatsoever. So,
you can see the crop on that one, and it's
yeah,
like, these guys are being well fed, and at this point, um, their success rate, I think, goes up
yeah, for
considerably. The
sure.
first 2 weeks, Drew was saying it earlier, is where things can go wrong. They're so little, and a misstep by an adult or the weather, can really wreak havoc. But these guys are robust and no reason why three shouldn't fledge.
Yeah, and looking out at some of the buildings and the adult looks kind of wet. So probably after a rain potentially or raining in this shot. So yeah, anything even like rain, these guys are fine at this point. But when they're really young, even a rain can cause some things, and we've seen that in spring. These freak
Yeah.
spring storms that we get in Wisconsin from time to time. It can cause wreak
And the
havoc
temperature
on the nest.
plummets. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's great to see these guys going. Hopefully, all goes well. They definitely look well fed and doing a
Hmm.
great job. And as we mentioned before about this nest, it's a learning process. They have these instincts and they still have to learn how to be good parents. And seems like Bella and Scat are doing a great job. So hopefully smooth sailing and three fledging. So we'll see. We'll keep an eye on that one as well. All right, this is one of the most
Jackie and
popular
Shadow.
nests in the country. Yes, and Jackie and Shadow in Big Bear, California. these guys are growing rapidly, and we've mentioned that they go from about 2 ounces at hatch all the way up to females are about usually around about 12 pounds in the lower 48, or not, or maybe not in the southern part, but the more northern part of the country. The females tend to be around 12 pounds, 11, 12 pounds. So growing very well. They're looking good. So
I just
that's
noticed all the whitewash all over that nest in
yeah,
the trees.
yeah.
Um,
So yeah,
and
they're
that's
getting
from shooting their poop, which
yeah,
I didn't realize actually until we started watching these, Drew, how young they shoot their poop.
yeah.
So good for them.
That's a little pro tip that I've experienced and Beth has probably experienced first. If you see a tree that's got a whitewash like this, it's definitely if you're looking at a nest and it doesn't seem like it's active. It was probably active in the past if you see all this whitewashing around the nest. So, and sometimes you see it at the bottom of the nest too as well. So it's
Which
a
is
good
one of the
little
reasons why
pro.
you never want to be too close to a
Yeah,
nest.
yeah,
You will get shot.
yes,
Um,
yes.
by poop,
So,
sorry.
and
Oh, so the one there is scratching its head, so it's a little crumpled over. But I think this is the really awkward time of their development when their brown, mature adult feathers are starting to come in and they're breaking through that fluffy down gray. Um, and I notice a lot of people reference them as having clown feet, which I never
yeah,
really thought about before, but they're just awkward because they're sitting on their rear ends, which is, you know, just not something you think about an eagle doing. So it's when they're growing up, it's just there's a lot of awkwardness and not a lot of grace. You know,
yeah.
they stumble around. Their bodies are growing so rapidly. It's hard for them to manage it.
Yeah, and at that, these guys are about 6 weeks old. This is one of the milestones that I look at with the Nest Watch program. Once they get to this 6 week, and they're feeding themselves and able to kind of defend if something comes in and tries to take them in the nest. They have the ability. They're big enough to defend themselves. There's usually a high rate of them fledging, so this is a great sign with them. Looks like smooth sailing once they got past the storms that unfortunately took the life of the third one. But these guys seem to be flourishing and looking great, looking healthy. So
And suddenly that nest is looking smaller and smaller as
yes,
they're growing
yeah.
larger and larger.
It does get tight for sure once before they fledge, and we'll see that as we go along with this one as well. You see, it gets very tight, and I think that's part of the reason they get excited and everything, and then by the time they fledge, just because of the nest, it gets tight, and they want to fly. So I think it gives them some motivation to do that. All right, our second topic, and again, it's gonna be a little bit graphic with the pictures. So, if you don't feel comfortable with that, with eagles with some pretty good battle wounds, I would shut it off now. But if you are interested, we're gonna talk a little bit about territorial battles in nest territories, and if you want to sign off now, we'll give you a second to do that. But if you are interested, we're gonna do a deep dive. It's gonna be Wisconsin related. So
And
um,
these are going to be battles from one is from the territory that I um oversee, and the other one is likely from where Drew oversees. So uh, uh it's interesting because of 10 years ago we didn't have eagles here that we were aware of, and so now it's not so unusual to see an eagle. And now we're starting to get some. some battles going on, which is what happens when a territory looks really great and another eagle thinks, hey, I like this territory, and a battle ensues. So um, these happen to be from Who's Wood Raptor Center, which is sort of on the border of our two territories, and they took in two birds in the last week or so that um, have had a rough go of it. So this is a male, and I believe this is he's in my territory, and put out a call to the nest watchers in the area. Make sure you've got both your pair of eagles there, because if one goes missing, then there's a good chance that there's going to be a struggle at the nest, to raise whatever young are in it. So far, we don't have any nest that is missing a male bald eagle. We have another one that is in rehab within our territory at Fellow Mortals, and that bird as well. We don't know where it belongs, but it's a mature bald eagle. And if they have a brood patch, that generally means that they are on the nest helping a female nest. I don't know about these birds, whether or not they had a brood patch, but they got into a territorial dispute.
And that just what does that mean? I guess what is it? Just, what are they doing? I know we've talked about the locking talons as kind of a bonding between the male and the female for that territory, but they also do similar things when there's a territorial battle. So they a lot of times they're locking talons. You might see in the news, it happens quite a bit in Florida and other areas. Sometimes they find them on the ground with their talons still locked together, and it can be traumatic for them. They crash to the ground. They're supposed to release like they do, excuse me, for their breeding, but it's a different thing. So it's it happens, and as this one, you can see that the beak is pretty beat up.
It was punctured. I think the veneer, was punctured with a talon, as well as a few other injuries to his body. He's being referred to Twilight because he was picked up at Twilight. Rescuers went out to get him. Property owners heard and found him under some brambled wood, so it took somebody to really crawl in there to retrieve him. He was trying to protect himself as best he could after he apparently lost the battle. So hopefully the other eagle is in better shape and back at the nest or moving on or whatever. We don't really know. We know no one was witness to this, so we don't know whether he was an interloper or he was on a nest. But if he was on a nest, it's not one that we know of at this point.
Yeah, and that that brings up another question that we let our volunteers know in that particular area to check their nests and make sure anytime we get a report of an eagle going into rehab or a dead eagle found, just to make sure that our nest territories are healthy and that they have both in the pair. Because with one, it's just extremely hard for them to finish the season. It's definitely a two bird job most of the time. And there has been a few that have been successful to fledge, but it's pretty rare. Most of the time, the nest will fail unless it's maybe the tail end of the season, like right
When
before
they're
fledge.
bigger.
If something happens, it's easier, but overall, not that easy.
So the next slide is also going to be from Who's Woods, and this is the
Yeah,
rough
this
one.
is pretty graphic, and this is
So this was Orion, and on the left, this was him as he is as she, I'm
yeah,
sorry, came into rehab at Who's Woods, and you can tell
yeah,
this was a fight to the death. I mean, so this is going to be for sure some sort of a territorial
yeah,
dispute between potentially two females. To the right, you see her. This is after 4 days, and she is looking, significantly better. As far as we're aware, this morning, both these eagles are still alive and
yeah.
in care. They're going to be in care for quite a while, but they are continuing to survive. So that is really good news. But this is a real education for me. I mean, I have not seen anything like this in our area. Um, so the only thing we can assume is it was a territorial battle. This was her as she was being
Rescued. Yeah.
rescued, and it's boy, that is really rough to see. An eagle on eagle battle.
Yeah.
Um, those guys aren't fooling around. I mean,
No.
they're protecting their territory, their nest, their food source, their eaglets. It is their everything eagles are about, it's they're protecting. It's theirs and they're trying to hold on to it. And again, we don't know if that is an eagle that lost the battle, it was their territory, or if it was an interloper. um, but now we're starting to see where um, territories are looking good to eagles coming back into the region, and they're wanting to take it over.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good sign, but it's also something that's going to happen. You see it a lot. And some of the, you see it in Alaska, you see it in Florida, and some of the tighter areas around the Mississippi or whatever in other states. Um, it's prime real estate, so you'll see battles, and it's part of the nature of the Eagles. And it's the reason they lock talons and do that is to show off their strength, and make sure that they're both healthy. And then in some cases, you see this a lot in the animal world. There's a big male that or in some other mammals or whatever, and he's pushed by other males trying to take his territory, and it's similar in eagles, but it's actually on both sides. So there'll be females trying to take the female's spot at the nest, and also in the male's side.
There's still plenty of room in Wisconsin. If I could
Yeah,
counsel them, I would say there's a lot of rich, ample space for eagles, yet you don't have to go to
yeah,
this length. But, we talk about how weather is bad on eagles, but as adult eagles, mature eagles, other eagles are probably one of their
yeah.
biggest reasons for death. But I would suspect that's going to be behind getting hit by a car or landing wrong on a power line and being electrocuted. So there are a lot of things that can take out mature eagles, but eagle on eagle is certainly up there in territory disputes.
Okay, and we'll take this off just so maybe we'll do, I don't know. We'll do we'll do
There's
Bodie.
Bodie. We'll look at
Yeah, we'll
Bodie.
do Bodie.
So the other thing that happened yesterday is, yeah, you alerted me. I was at a program with um, at a grade school with some captive raptors, and Drew uh, brought me the news of a text message in the middle of grade school kids that the fourth eaglet had died, and that we had a problem at one of our nests that, again, right on our territory line, um, of a bird being down, and it expired shortly after being taken into care. And the suspected reason for death was,
Yeah, bird flu is coming back.
yeah.
So HPAI is still there. We're monitoring the situation. Unfortunately, we can't do a whole lot, but we'll see what happens. The reason that this is we're heading into April, and we're seeing, especially if you look at some of those the radars for migration, that definitely influences, and that brings a lot of the waterfall are migrating up into Wisconsin, and if they have that disease, it can be caught by the eagles and other raptors and other ducks and other birds, can catch it. And with migration, you have large numbers of birds kind of grouping together, mostly on the lakes and rivers. So it can cause, you know, spreading is a lot easier in those cases. So we'll well, we're monitoring it, but hopefully it's nothing like a couple of years ago. But we just don't know for
It's
now. But
starting about the same time it
yeah,
did in 2022. And so that year we lost 65% of our nests. And
yeah,
how I do the math is we typically lose between 10 to 15% of nests. And that can be the whole nest, the tree fell down during a storm. So again, weather being one of the largest contributors to nest failure. But we had a 65% failure rate. So if we take 15% out of that for weather related, that means we have 50% of
yeah,
our nests failed that year due to avian flu. That
yeah,
was the new equation. And the following year was predicted to be as bad or worse,
yeah,
and nothing. It was
yeah,
a
yeah,
very successful year. Um, Last year was a successful year. We didn't have avian flu in any of our territories. I think probably far northern Wisconsin did, but
yeah.
we did not. Um, so this year, we'll just
We'll see. Yeah, I think
man.
it's something that, kind of like we have with COVID. Avian influenza is not going anywhere, and it's going to be ebbs and flows, and it's going to, influence chickens, and it's the domestic birds as well as the wild birds like eagles and other raptors and waterfowl. Um, and it's going to kind of go up and down, and we'll see. And, obviously the virus is going to change and mutate and do all that stuff that they do. And we'll see.
This
Hopefully
is
it's a
just a
positive year. Yeah.
particularly harsh strain,
Yeah.
which I think they predicted years too early, which
Yeah.
I guess is what predictions is for, is to prepare us for the worst. But eh, 2022 was terrible, and
Yeah.
it's a slow and uh, unpleasant death.
Yeah.
It is not good to die from avian flu, just as it is a horrible death to die from lead poisoning. So, which is a lot of reasons why birds end up into rehab also is from lead poisoning. So please don't use lead bullets, don't use lead fishing hook and sinkers. Go to stainless steel, use copper. I'm probably going to say this every podcast.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and
it's
and also with that, if you are out and about and you do see, especially waterfall, if you see dead waterfall, please, 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 contact your local, they Fish and Wildlife or whatever your state calls it, game wardens. Please contact them, make sure that they're aware of this, so they can clean up those sites, just to prevent, more of the contracting of the virus. Because those dead birds, they're gonna be taken, they're gonna be eaten by mostly eagles and other scavengers, and that not a good thing. So
and a little shout out here to a nest we have out in southern Milwaukee County. They're along the lakefront, and without naming names and exact areas, but the community came together because they had so many dead mergansers washing up on the shore, and there is a wonderful volunteer out there who keeps the beaches clean, and he was picking them up every morning to keep the beach clean and tucking their bodies where they couldn't be got at by any other animal. And the watchers for our nest, and along with a sort of a satellite group on Messenger that or on yeah, Messenger that keeps me informed about the nest. They went to their alderman to talk about the issue, and a cleaning crew has been coming up and out and making sure that the dead birds are up and off the beach, and then they take them to the dump where they aren't just put into the food waste system where any animal can now scavenge that dead merganser and eat it and also acquire the flu, but they actually bury it.
yeah,
So when they know that birds affected with avian flu are coming to the dump, they will bury it deep in the ground so that eagles cannot scavenge or any other mammal or bird can scavenge those birds. And so, other than incinerating, I think that's the only way to try to keep the birds out of the food chain. So
Yeah.
we'll see if that helps at all with heading, avian flu being in the area, if that helps to tamp down that 50% that was lost to avian flu. But um, I do appreciate municipalities understanding what's going on and doing those types of wonderful things to keep it onto the food web.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And let's go into let's review our question and answer from last week. And the question was, do eagles use the nest year round? And what's the answer, Beth? What do you
The answer
think?
to that is no. And
Yeah. No.
I think that seems to be along with, eaglets are going to eat each other, kill each other in a nest. The fact that eagles are in their nest year round is another myth that I hear a lot about. So, nests of all birds are purely for raising young. So, it's for laying eggs and raising young. And once those birds have fledged, they don't use their nest
Yeah.
anymore. Now, like we see in this photo with Juvie perched out on a branch, you might see the mature eagles roosting beside the nest in their territory year round. You could catch that at any time. But they aren't going to lay in the nest bowl like Bodie is doing in this photo. So just like the robin nest that's in your yard or the cardinal nest, they raise their young, that nest is empty. And you
Yeah.
don't see it occupied again until, the following year.
Yeah.
Um, so that is my answer to that, unless you
Yeah.
have anything different
Yeah.
to add to it.
No, no, it's yeah. And it depends by pair. Some pairs I could find them by their in their nest territory pretty much every month of the year, and others do migrate. Some of the adults do migrate to other areas, and you'll just see them during the nesting season, and then after that you won't see them in their territory. So it all depends on the territory as well as far as if they're going to be there, but they do not use the nest all year round. Are kind of on the same boat and kind of to um, link it to our episode this week is do bald eagles, are they territorial year round? Do they protect and fight year round, or is it just part of the year? So that'll be our question. So answer those either in the comments on this podcast or on our Facebook page, and or you can also email us at nestingeaglespodcast@gmail.com. Also, just a reminder, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, comment with us, send us pictures, comments. We'd like to hear from you guys. It's always a lot more fun to interact with our audience on different topics, all things related to eagles. Doesn't have to be nesting. We can answer those as well. Anything you're interested in eagles, and maybe it's something we can do a podcast or do a small short video on if it interests you. And then second, our vocabulary word of the day. In honor of Bodie and some of the ones that are fledging, we're going to use the term full fledge. That's what we use at the Nest Watch, is a full fledge. So what does full fledge mean? Again, answer those questions in the comments. Email us on the Facebook page, and we'll answer that next week. And I think that'll do it. Anything else, Beth, you can think of that?
No, I think, if anyone makes it to this point in our podcast and you have
Yeah,
suggestions for us, let us know,
yeah,
because we're trying to make this as interesting for you as we can. And both of us are um, learning as we go on trying not to say as much as both of us do, but but bringing you guys some interesting facts on bald eagles. And also just a shout out to all the moderators and admins out there that are and the camera crews and facilities that are bringing us these bald eagle nest cams. We really appreciate you, and we thank all of you, and we will list you all underneath our podcast. Um, and um, and if I can make a shout out to anything else, I would say if you can support your local rehabber, if you have some extra cash laying around, I know I don't, but if you, I have certainly done this in the past, make a donation to your local rehab center, or you can help out Who's Woods with the eagles that we showed you today, um, or any rehabber, because they have a tough job and
Yeah.
they are generally working on donations alone. So, and my heart goes out to them because they have a rough job.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, with that done, as we said, subscribe and contact us, and we'll be back soon to talk more eagles and nesting eagles. So thank you for joining us.
Bye bye.